as the conversation that you hosted on private chef work. People seem to like it. People seem to enjoy it. So I'd be curious, just if you wouldn't mind riffing with me a little bit on a little bit more of that, and if there's any more kind of like, and you can go either direction, like general thought processes and kind of like overarching big decisions you can make as you're thinking about private chef stuff, or little tactical, like this is how I write my emails, or how I set up my tools bag for to be in someone's home. Kind of advice for people who are wanting to get more private chef work, or they've just started private chef work and they're feeling a little bit like out of their element.
Yeah, for me, and it's still something I struggle with, is I would say like knowing what you're good at, knowing what you can execute, and knowing when to say when. Like I have a customer this weekend, and maybe it's because I'm cooking in an Airbnb I've been at before, but like I proposed a menu. She's like, well, we'd really like to have like say a risotto and scallops. I know I can't execute that. It's a four burner stove. I know this house. But even if I didn't, for me, if I go in as one person, knowing that like it's 13 people, like doing risotto for 13 people by myself on a home stove, and then you want a scallop on top of that where I have to like pan sear them all individually. And by the way, 3 minutes later, you want your entree and two side like, and I think a lot of people bite off more than they can chew. And I think knowing how to have that conversation, say like, the reality is like I'm there cooking by myself. It's a home four burner stove. I know you go to restaurants and you have risotto and scallops, but like you have to realize it's not really something that's executable in like a home kitchen environment. I've had customers say like, "Oh, we would love oysters," and knowing that like I'm not an oyster guy, I don't like to eat them. I am really terrible at shucking them. Like I can muddle my way through for like a 2 to 4 top, but if I have 10 people, like just saying like that's not something I'm comfortable doing. And I think a lot of us as personal chefs, we want to say we can do everything. And knowing that like you can't be a master of all cuisines and techniques and everything, and it doesn't do you or your customer any good to bullshit them and say like, sure, I'll come and do like an oyster bar for a dozen people, and yeah, like let's do scallops and risotto right before you have your next two courses, and just being comfortable with like explaining to your customer. And I think they'll respect you for that and understand that.
Huge pro tip that you started that story with: Airbnbs as venues is dopeness. I don't know if
That's
you
my moneymaker. That's my
nice.
moneymaker. Like I
So
tell all the people, like that's what has kept me in business.
so you do that seeking out, and you send them a link of like, here's the Airbnb, it's available, here's the price, you guys need to book it, kind of
No,
thing.
so what happened is it really started with me putting it together when customers started finding me. So customers would just book an Airbnb, and then they would do the work of like searching for a chef. And I would go out to this place. I'm like, oh, you don't live here? It's an Airbnb. Can I get the info? So I'm there and I'm taking tons of photos. So making sure that like then I'm posting photos of the dinner on Instagram and tagging the Airbnb, and then following up with a DM or an email and saying like, I don't know if you know anything about me or that I was at your house, but I was there this weekend. I cooked for this party. I'm sure you could follow up with them, and they would say I was great. But like, I would love to be a referral. And when someone books your house, can you, say if you need a chef, contact Chris. And then so like to take that one step further, like, could you put my information on your website? Because you know, a lot of times an Airbnb owner will say, well, send me some cards, I'll put them in the house. Well, like that doesn't work. Like when people get into the house, like they're not going to book me. They need that ahead of time. And I try and go at it from the extent of saying like, I think this is a value add that would help sell your place, because like my wife and I are foodies. And if we're looking to get away for the weekend and we look at your house, but you're in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to say to my wife, like, where are we going to be eating? Like, I would love to come to their website and see like, oh, they also have a chef, like, who they would recommend, and here's his website. So really being proactive in that approach, and just kind of reaching out to them and kind of doing like cold calling, again, something not comfortable with, just sending a random DM or email and saying like, I know you don't know anything about me, but here's kind of my resume, look at my reviews, and I would love if when people booked your place, you sent them my info. And that has just been, it keeps the money coming in. All these people just say, yeah, I'm staying at Mortgage Hall in Middleburg, and they said, call Chris. And the benefit of having the Chefs Without Restaurants network is that it's also a gig sharing platform. So even though I am not going to do the wedding for 100 people, if you're staying at that venue, I can connect you with someone who can. So I really wanted to be the guy who could find a chef for whatever size event you're having in the DMV area. And, is there a way to scale that and take that nationally? If I'm not in Seattle, could I still somehow partner with Airbnbs in Seattle and connect them with you or something, and that's something I'm looking at.
That's the type of use of the word hustle that I actually really kind of like. That's dope, and I think that it's kind of gotten bastardized to this, you need to work 90 hours a week and just grind yourself in the ground and whatever. But like, you pursuing opportunities like that. So there's a venue here in Seattle where I did the same thing, similar, not the same thing. It was, I wanted to host a pop-up. It was on a night when the restaurants that I had normally been working with they had service. Like, it was a Friday or Saturday night. And I really wanted to do one on a Friday or Saturday night to test if this pop-up concept that I was doing would have legs on a Friday night. And so went on Airbnb, found this Airbnb in this neighborhood that's like, it's like a semi-residential neighborhood here in Seattle. And I go talk to the guy. I tell him, hey, and I was transparent on this. Like, people have advice that go either way. Like, don't tell them you're hosting a party. Because I think that what Airbnb hosts are really trying to avoid is like the 150 person one that's going to show up on the news kind of party, right? Like, if you have a small dinner party, it is what it is. But I reached out to this guy and I said, hey, I noticed that you talked about renting this out for private events. He said something on the page. Gave me a tour of the space. He had an entire downstairs basement tiki bar set up that could have easily held like 40 to 50 people and was like fully built out and ready. And, had the pop-up series kept going, I would have worked with that venue tons and tons more. But he's like, hey, listen, when you do this again, just like call me directly. Don't book on Airbnb. I'll give you a better price because I don't have to pay Airbnb's fees. And we can just kind of like, but that element of like, nobody gave me that connection. Like, I had to find that. I had to hustle for that. Like, that's the use of that word that I actually enjoy. It's like, seek out these opportunities, like know when to like semi break the rules or ask for what you want. That's what I hope that people are kind of taking away from this. I have one more point, but I'd be curious to hear if you have anything to share there.
Well, this is a kind of, it adds on to that, but it's a little different slant. So my Department of Health around here hates that. And they would say that is running an illegal underground restaurant.
Sure.
Because that is what I did. One time I have an Airbnb who I am very good friends with. And we hosted a dinner there. And we invited some influencers who didn't pay. And there was some media there. And some people paid. And she actually was at the dinner. She gave a tour of the Airbnb. We thought it was a great partnership. She didn't charge me. The people who were there wrote some amazing pieces. And then the Department of Health came at me because, it was the cover story in Frederick Magazine and in the Frederick News Post. And it looked like I was running an underground restaurant out of an Airbnb. And while they couldn't come after me, this woman who has an Airbnb also has other businesses that she runs on her property. And then that next week, I'm not saying this happened, but a government agent came on her property because allegedly someone placed a phone call saying that someone was illegally living on her property, which wasn't true. But when they were there, they found other things there. Nothing illegal, but just like things that weren't up to code. And I just felt like it was this like shakedown. Like, basically the Department of Health was coming after me, but they couldn't come after me. So they were kind of like going up the chain to come after her to kind of set the signal that like anyone who kind of helps Chris facilitate this illegal restaurant is going to come under scrutiny. And I don't like that kind of business.
Emulsion podcast disclaimer: do your research, everybody. Like, make sure that
it
like
varies from state to state. And
correct, like
county to county. One of my old sous chefs is actually a Department of Health inspector in another county in Maryland, about 20 minutes from here. And I called him and asked him about this, and he ran it up the flagpole to his boss. And his boss said, if you are doing it in a private residence or an Airbnb, that is not our business, not our concern. We have bigger fish to fry. We don't care. If you want to rent a Airbnb in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and do this, it's fine. But if I do this in Frederick, they are coming after me.
That's us here too, at least in the time when I was doing those events, was if someone can walk off the street into that Airbnb and sit down in a seat and pay, that's not okay. If I sell tickets in advance and it's understood what the guest list is, they completely know what they're signing up for. That's considered a private ticketed event. Totally kosher.
See, we can't do the private ticketed events.
Mm,
If you publish online, they say it's not private. If you go on Instagram and say, DM me for tickets, if you make an Eventbrite, if you do any of that, they consider that a public event because then literally anyone in the public can do it. And if it's a public event, then it is open to inspection by the Department of Health. Things
fascinating.
I've learned.
Yeah, fascinating. Everybody do
Which
their
makes me
research.
not want to do that. It makes me just want to do private dinners.
Yeah, it kills certain types of business models and structures, and
But it goes back to, again, what is a restaurant and the
hmm
evolving model?
hmm
And I think, we have inspectors who are of a certain generation and a certain mindset of things. And they don't like pop-ups and takeovers because I've looked at, this restaurant, they're closed on a Monday night. Can I go in and do a dinner there? They don't like that. They don't want me doing a pop-up in a brewery, like is a very old school mindset because they're used to a very traditional model and they're not staying with the times, in my opinion.
the silly place where my mind goes, and this is like very much so a symptom of when I was at Per Se, they launched the like sous vide program in New York, and the Department of Health there used them and their whole program as an example for what the HACCP plan should look like for all other restaurants that were wanting to do sous vide. And so like my hustle brain, right? That brain goes towards, if you're in a county that's like that, how could you approach that person and say like, if I keep temperature records on everything that I'm working with, is that something that you guys would, like, how can you start that conversation to kind of like tell them that you're willing to be more, because it's a liability thing for them, right? At the end of the day, like they don't want the citizens going up in some sort of uproar that people are getting sick at this poke pop up because everybody, like, this company is serving spoiled fish to the citizens, and all of a sudden like they're having to spend county resources to clean up your mess, right? Like that's what they're trying to avoid. And so
But
how
how is
can
it
you
different if I come into your house and do that though?
sure
Like if they're
sure
the same
great
people,
question.
right? Like it's just
Yep,
semantics of it. Like if
thousand
I come to
percent.
Justin's house and he and his wife are having a party for 10 people and they all get sick, like that's okay. And why is it different that you hired me privately versus me soliciting for customers?
Fascinating.
It's just very, there's so many nuances to all of it. And I just
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't have the patience for it because so much of it is like BS. And I mean,
Totally.
I get it. I'm someone who's been ServSafe certified since like 1994. Like I understand there's a lot of people, the pandemic for sure. I mean, there's a lot of people like, selling tacos out of their garage at their home because they're trying to make ends meet. Like I know there's a lot of things you need to police. I just am at the point in my career where I don't have the time or patience for that. I'm just kind of exhausted with it all.
A point I want to bring back to before we jump into rapid fire stuff is this idea of when you lead with private chef, custom menus, experience in a bunch of in a myriad of different cuisines or techniques or arenas. It's common, I think, to think that you have to lead with that, and I think that part of your, what you mentioned of that frustration of presenting or feeling like you're on the back foot when clients ask for things that you're either not comfortable preparing yourself, uh, they aren't going to be represented well by you and the way that you cook, or listen, so and so the venue doesn't allow for this. I think that there's advice that I can give, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Is like, know what your go-to menu offerings are, and if that client wants something in addition to that, they're going to ask you for it. Versus this idea of giving the client a blank canvas and saying, "Please paint on this," and then I will replicate whatever it is that you do. Like, have the confidence to lead with what you do. You do best, and is going to work, because if they have those questions or there's those specific things that they want, they will come to you with those after the fact. But you should lead and take that proactive. That's my advice. I'd be curious to hear.
So I do a questionnaire and I'll go through it, like beside the nuts and bolts of who you are and when you want this. It's scale of 1 to 10, how adventurous are you? 1 to 10, how much spice do you like? Foods and cuisines you love, foods and cuisines you hate. Is any dietary restrictions, allergies, etc. Are you okay with the use of alcohol in your dinner? And then they fill that out. And I'm a 8 for adventurous, a 4 for spice. I love Mexican and Thai. I hate Middle Eastern, Italian. No allergies, alcohol is okay. And then I go from there. And then I have a go-to menu for all 4 seasons. And then I just start eliminating based on, okay, they don't like these cuisines and I take those off. Then I look at things like, what do I not want to make and take those things off? And just kind of tailor it down to like a 2-page menu of apps, soups, salads, entrees, desserts, and send it to them. But then they still might come back and say, like this last party, like, well, we said we liked Italian. I noticed you didn't put risotto on there. The birthday girl really loves risotto. Can you do it? And that's where I have to come back and say, like, the venue does not, like, it's just not conducive to doing this there. I could probably do a pasta, like a pasta is easier. You put pasta in water and it's done. It's not like a risotto you have to stir. And just, can you find some middle ground? I'm never trying to shove anything down their throat. I really want to build a menu. It's not 100% customized. Like, I have a list of, it might be 400 things that I'm pulling from that I whittle down to them. I'm not sitting there scratching my head saying, like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be sending out to my customers per season. And then some of it, I allow myself for chef's courses. So I used to let them pick all the courses. Now I've taken 1 to 2 courses out, and then I bring like chef's surprise course based on how adventurous they say they are.
Right.
And go from there. But yeah, I mean, just again, knowing that I can't do everything. And this is a much bigger conversation, but talking about like cultural appropriation and what you're comfortable with doing. Because I think people think because you're a personal chef and it's customized, you can and will do everything, right? Like, if you want Italian food, you would go to an Italian restaurant. You would never go to a Mexican restaurant and get upset that you couldn't get a lasagna. But I think people hear that you're a personal chef and it's personalized and customized. They say, we want lasagna. Why aren't you going to make me a lasagna? And like, maybe I've never made a lasagna. Maybe I don't feel like that's a cuisine that I should be, people will come and want like Indian food. Like, I can make some things Indian-ish, but I didn't grow up eating Indian food, really. I didn't grow up cooking Indian food. Like, why do you want me making Indian food? Like, you should probably just go to an Indian restaurant. And if you want me, like, why don't you order the things that I'm really good at and some of my specialties?
Interesting. Yeah, that could be. I'm gonna put a pin in that for our next conversation. Because I do have thoughts to share. Yeah, and I'm someone who, my dad, who is Indian, didn't really cook that much Indian food, and so the semi connection I had with Indian food was through my grandmother, and she passed away when I was 11, and so it's like I have memories of her food, but I never cooked with her. And then there's this funny dynamic when I go to India. It's like none of my aunties want me to be in the kitchen because it's very much so a household where the woman of the house is the one that cooks, and so it's a very strange like dynamic when I want to be in the kitchen with any of my the people in my family who do the cooking, who have the knowledge to share with me. So I'm going to put a pin in that because I know this isn't going to be our last conversation, and I'd be curious to pick that up on our next one.